Hello everybody. This is a video I'm putting together for those of you who want some assistance with the Chapter 9 assignment for CIS 117. And this is the airline passenger assignment program where you present a menu to the user and they have the choice of assigning passengers to seats. So I just wanted to show you how to get this application started, or if you struggled with it, maybe some ideas of how you could approach it. So first off, I have a starting point here. I've got an assignment 09 class with a main method in it. And notice it's a static method. And one of the ways that you can set up an application is that you can create an object of the type of class of your assignment, ASG09, like you see here. And then what you can do is you can write a method in your class, a constructor, like this, where you would initialize various parameters or whatnot and get your program started. So when you run this program, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to run line 7, and it's going to create a new instance of ASG09. And it's going to call that object the app. And of course, what's going to happen is the constructor will get called for that class. And this is my constructor right here. And what you can do in here is you can start your program. And the two things I want to do is I want to perform an initialization, and then I want to present a menu to the user. That second method will put up a menu, get the user's response, and then call the appropriate actions depending on what the user selects. When the user decides to quit, that method can complete, and this constructor will be finished, and it'll come back, the program will come back to line 8. There'll be nothing left to do, and the program will terminate at that point. So what I can do here now is I can create two methods, an initialization, and then I have my present menu method that I want to create. So to start with the initialization here, I need a way to store all of these seat assignments. And one way of doing that is to create an array. Now I want to use this array throughout my program. So I'm going to declare this array at the top of my class, and I'm just going to put a comment up here that says create an array of seats. And what this will be is a private array of strings. And I'm going to make this a two-dimensional array because I have 18 rows and 3 columns. So what I need is an array. I'm going to call it seats, and I'm going to create it as a new array of strings, and the size of this will be 18 by 3. And I'm going to be using 18 and 3 a lot in my program. So one of the first things I'm going to do is create some constants up here. So private final integer called rows, that's equal to 18, and then another one called cols, which is equal to 3. And then what I can do here is put rows and cols in for my dimensions of my array, like that. So now I have an array. The other thing I'm going to need is a scanner object. So I'm going to come up here and set that up as well. Private. And I only need one scanner object. I don't need to create multiples. So I'm going to create a private scanner input equals new scanner system.in. And now I have a scanner object that I can use called input. So I have an array, and when the initialize function gets called, when the program starts up, of course this will only happen once, what I want to do in that initialize method is I want to take my array and clear it out. So to do that, I'm going to set up a loop. The loop is going to span all the rows in my array. And because it's a two-dimensional array, I'm going to also create an inner loop for the second dimension, like this. And then what I'll do is I will set right here seats, and then I will reference I as my first index and j as my second, and set each element equal to an empty string. So basically I am clearing this array, and I'm going across all the rows, and then for each row I'm clearing out the columns. Now in the figure here, you'll notice that the first row and the second row don't have the seats B and C. So what I want to do here is eliminate invalid seats from first two rows. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to seats, take the first row, second column, and set it equal to X. And I'll do that with the first row, third column, and I'll do the exact same thing for the second row. Notice again with arrays, you always index your elements starting at 0. So when it says 0 here, that's the first row, and 1 actually refers to the second column. And here we have the first row, third column, that corresponds to the first row, second, and third columns. And I do this for both first and second rows of my seating chart here. So those 4 elements are now going to be blocked with X's that indicates they're invalid, basically. So that's my initialization method. That's going to get called first. The next thing I want to do is create this present menu function. And what I want to do here is display my menu, and then I want to let the user make a choice and take action based on that. So what I did for this is I created a variable called response. It's just an integer. And then I created a loop. And this loop is going to present the menu. You can see all these print statements present the menu. Now, I want to get an integer back from the user, and it needs to go between 1 and 7. And I don't want the user entering letters or any other things. So I created a function called getIntegerValue, where you pass a prompt to it, and a minimum and a maximum. It asks the user the question that you presented as your first argument, and it expects the user to type in an integer, and it makes sure that it's between these two values and returns it back to the user. I'll show you the details of that method here in a second. But assuming that the user types in a valid response, response will be set equal to that. And then I have a switch statement that acts upon my response. And for each case, 1 through 6, I created a method for each one of these tasks, so that my program is modular in the sense that there's a function or a method for each action that I want the program to do for me. Now these are all in red because I have not implemented these yet. So what I can do is I can come in and create what we call stubs for each one of these. And a stub is basically where you create a method and you have nothing inside of it yet. So I can do this then for all of these. I can create stubs for each one of these functions, and then that will get rid of all of these error messages. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And you can see that IntelliSense helps me with the naming of these things because it sees that are up there, and it makes it so I don't have to type them in over and over, which is kind of nice. You can see here if I type display, it sets it up so I can just hit tab and it completes it for me. So the only thing left is get integer value. Now that one will return an integer. And it will take a prompt and then a minimum and a maximum value. And it will return, and after now I'll just put 0 here, and I'll complete this later. So now if I go back up, I have no errors in my program, and I can do a build just to make sure, and it says completed successfully, no errors. There's no red marks anywhere on the right side, so I know I have no errors in my program. So I have all my methods, so now it's just a matter of going in and filling them all out. Now, the method to get an integer value from the user, let's take a look at that one first and show you how I implemented that. This is something that you could use in other programs that you write if you'd like to. It's something that you could use in multiple places, different projects. So this is a function that could potentially be placed in a utility class for future use. But at any rate, what you do basically is you create a value, and this value here is what the user will, well, basically that when they type something in and it's an integer, it'll be stored in value, and value is returned at the end of the function. So that's the point, is to set value with what the user is going to enter in. I have a flag here that is false initially, and the only way we're going to succeed is if that flag gets set to true. Created a scanner object, and technically I didn't really have to create this scanner, but I created it so that this method has no dependencies on anything around it. If I didn't create the scanner in here, I would have to depend on the one I created on the outside. So I purposely created a scanner on the inside of the method, completely closing it off from anything around it. I have a loop here that keeps going as long as valid is false. It puts up the prompt and puts a chevron after it with a space. And then I call the next line method, and I wait for the user to enter something. When they do, I store it in this string called input. Now this section here, this try-catch block, will attempt to convert what the user entered in into an integer. If they typed in an integer, it will have no problem doing this, and value will be set to the number. If, however, they typed in gibberish or letters or whatever, and it can't parse what they've given me into an integer, and by the way, this could also happen if they type in a decimal number, parsing it will fail, and an exception will get thrown. That's why I have a try-catch block here. We're going to try to do this, and if it fails, it's going to catch an exception. When that exception is caught, I'm going to print up that there was an error, and this loop will repeat, and we'll ask them again. Now, if they enter something that is an integer, this statement will succeed, and it will move forward to the next thing, which is a test that says, is the value they entered within range? If it's not within range, then I'm going to print out an error message telling them exactly what the problem is, complete with what their value should be between. Otherwise, if it was able to convert the value and it was not outside of range, then we're good to go. So we set valid to true. That will knock us out of this loop, after which the value is returned back to the caller, and the procedure at that point is finished. So that's one way that you can get valid input from the user, is by using an approach like this. And there are many ways of doing this. This is just one one of many approaches that you can take. So now we have a way of getting this thing working properly. And so if I go to run this program at this point, just to see what I get, if it'll work. Of course, these are all still stubbed out, but if I just go to run it and just to try it out here, you can see my menu comes up, and if I enter gibberish, I'm asked to repeat it. If I enter something outside the range, I'm asked to try again. If I enter something like a 3, it calls the function, which does nothing right now. So I come back to my menu, and then if I hit 7, the program terminates because that breaks me out of my menu loop. So this gives me a bare bones framework to start with. Now I've got something that presents a menu, all my choices have functions that get called, and everything is validated. So the only thing I have to do now is implement code in these methods. I have my array of seats, and now it's just a matter of, as I say, implementing each one of these methods. I'll show you how to do some of these methods. Won't do them all, but I'll show you how to do some of these in part 2 of this video, which will be available in Blackboard. So I'll see you there.